Hello everybody! I'm Blaise Fiedler. I'm a professional photographer based in France, and today I want to tell you everything there is to know about the brand new Pixel X800c. This is a full-featured flash. It has TTL mode, manual mode, multi-mode. It's got master and slave optical trigger, and it has a very innovative radio system. On top of that, it of course has high-speed sync, second current sync, and lots of external ports. So let's get started with the outside of this flash. You are going to be connecting this flash to your camera through this hot shoe. The hot shoe lock is exactly the same as you'll find on the premium Canon flash. So just a simple locking mechanism with a weatherproofing around it. On this side, a simple port for the 4AA batteries. I like it, spring locked. That's pretty, pretty cool. What you have here on this side is external battery pack port. So you could plug it into something like this, which takes 8 additional AA batteries, and that will allow you to shoot much longer, all evening long if you're a wedding photographer like I am, and will also accelerate your recycle time. You have a USB port. That's to upgrade the firmware. When Pixel come up with new firmware, you just plug it into your computer and you can upgrade your firmware. And finally, you have a PC port. Now this is a cable port that's going to allow to connect the flash to the camera if you want to still trigger it with a cable, despite the fact that this camera has so many other ways of triggering a flash remotely. So moving up, you've got the head of the flash. Now the head is, you can turn it 360 degrees, and in most positions you need to press the push button because there's some locking. You see here, locking mechanism. Here it's locked. You press it so the flash can go up. Why would you want to move this head? Well, let me give you a little insight because that's really important if you don't know yet why you would do that. Let me just put this on the camera. So if I'm going to be taking a photo of you like this, I'm going to be triggering my flash direct, and the light's going to be pretty horrible. Not because the flash is bad, but simply because direct light is not the best light. It's the worst light really you could produce. So whenever possible, you want to bounce the flash on an external surface. So the way you do that, here I've got a wall on my left. You just turn the flash to the left, you take a photo, and the flash is going to be bouncing on the wall and back to the camera. Okay, now you can also bounce this on the wall. So you just point it up and you bounce it on the wall. You can bounce it on the other wall. Now if I'm bouncing it here, okay, and I'm going to be changing my photo to portrait mode, well, this is not going to work. So you just tilt it like that and you're good to go, Now, something else you can do that works really well, if you have a wall behind you, white wall behind you, you can just bounce the flash like that behind you, and it's going to produce a beautiful source of light coming from all around you from behind. Hey, don't put the flash too close to your hair, or you might get sparkling hair after a while. So tilt it slightly to the top. Now moving on. What else do I have here? In the flash, I have little 2 accessories that are integrated. So let me just start with this little white card here. This is called a bounce card. The bounce card is really useful to project a little bit of light in front of you when you're bouncing light. So if I were to take a photo of you like this, right? What's going to happen is most of the light is going to hit the wall and go down on you. Thanks to this little bounce card, a little bit of light is going to be projected in front. And the consequence of that, it's going to take care of the shadows on the eyes, below the chin, and it's going to create a little bit of catch light in the eyes as well. So this is really useful, and I highly recommend when you're bouncing light, just to pull this little thing out. It's very helpful. And the second accessory, and they're rarely used at the same time, if ever. So it's a wide angle diffuser. You see here, which, as its name implies, diffuses the light over a wide angle. So when would you use that? Only when you're using a zoom that is wider than the maximum optical zoom of the flash. So the Pixel, for instance, has a 20mm widest optical zoom of its flash. So if you're using a 16mm lens, for instance, you could use this little panel so it diffuses the light to cover your whole image. Otherwise, it's only going to be covering the center of your image. Okay, so this doesn't create a softer light, it just creates a wider beam of light. So only use it when you're using a wide angle lens, otherwise it's going to do you no good. But of course, if you have a wide angle lens, this is great. This is really great. And I'm going to be just mentioning this again when we're talking about the zoom of this flash. So I think we've covered all the outside of the flash. Let's turn it on and look through its menus and features. Okay, so as you turn it on, it tells you which firmware you're in. I must tell you, this is a pre-production model I'm using. You might have very slightly different menus, but don't panic. I'd say we're 99% of what I'm going to be telling you, you'll find in your production model flash as well. The first thing here is a lock mechanism. Once you have this in lock, none of the buttons will be working. You will use lock if you want to make sure that nothing is touched on your flash. Otherwise, just move this switch to the on position. All the menus are dynamic, which means that as you're changing options and menus, touching different buttons, you might find different indications. You will find different indications in the different dynamic menus. So let's start with the three key modes in the Pixel X800c. The first mode is ETTL, the second is manual, and the third is multi. And I get to these three modes just by pressing this big button here. They cycle through these three modes. So let me start with ETTL. ETTL mode is the most intelligent, most automatic, most convenient mode that's out there. It's the equivalent of the auto exposure of your camera. It measures the light in your scene. Well, it measures your scene really, and then outputs exactly the right amount of light. Well, let's say the amount of light that it thinks is right. That would be more accurate. ETTL mode, which means electronic through the lens, triggers a pre-flash, measures the consequence of that pre-flash on exposure, and then triggers the real flash. But all this happens so fast that you have the feeling there's only one flash that's being triggered. You would use that in if you're walking around a lot, so you're changing your distance to the subject. If the light conditions are changing a lot, if you don't want to be manually adjusting the flash exposure regularly, TTL mode, or ETTL, which is the Canon version of TTL mode, is really a great mode to be using. The flash is doing the heavy lifting for you. It's doing a lot of work for you. So ETTL mode, you put it on your camera and you're good to go. The flash will be working for you. You have to think about how you're going to be positioning the head so to bounce, and you're really good to go. Now, I said the flash in ETTL mode is outputting what it believes to be the correct amount of light. Photography is a creative exercise. It's technical, but there's a lot of creativity as well involved. And what the flash believes the correct amount of light is might not be what you believe the correct amount of light should be for your photo. So you have control, even in ETTL mode, to transform that amount of light that your flash is projecting. So you take a photo in TTL mode and you look at your camera and you're seeing that the photo is underexposed. Not enough light is coming from the flash. Or overexposed. Too much light is actually coming from the flash. You would like the flash to be working at a lower power. So the good news is that you can actually change this the light output very easily in ETTL mode. So the trick is simply to press this plus and minus button. Once you do that, when you turn the wheel clockwise, you're telling the flash to output more light. And when you turn the wheel counterclockwise, you see that you've got minus EV here, you're telling the flash to output less light. And this is an exponential scale. So when I'm doing plus 1 EV, that means I'm outputting twice as much light. And then plus 2 EV means I'm outputting 4 times more light, and plus 3 EV is I'm outputting 8 times more light. Okay, so you're each time doubling the amount of light that you're outputting. And likewise, if you go in the minus, when you're minus 3, you're outputting only 1/8 of the light that you originally were. So this is a very easy way still to keep the TTL control, but at the same time master your exposure. Okay, let me get back to standard exposure here. And let's say that you're not sure whether you want to work at plus 1 EV, so compensate your flash exposure, which this really is flash exposure compensation, by 1 stop or not. So what you can do is do flash exposure compensation bracketing, FECB. And the easy way to do that is just press twice this button. So the first one is you do your compensation. The second is your flash exposure compensation bracketing. So let me here put plus 1, press OK. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to be taking 3 photos now, and each photo the flash is going to be adjusting its flash exposure compensation. The first one, -1, 0, +1. It's going to alternate by the value I'm telling him on the 3 different exposures. So you're really hedging your bets. So you're sure that, or you're more sure than that one of your photos is going to be well exposed. And you can combine both flash exposure compensation and flash exposure compensation bracketing. So I just press here. Here, for instance, I'm going to be working at +2 and bracketing at 0.7 EV. So what this is going to do, it's going to take the first photo with the flash at 2 minus 0.7, so plus 1.3, the second at 2, and then at 2.7. So it's going to take three exposures, or let's say the next 3 photos I'm going to take, the flash is going to change its exposure. Again, hoping, praying that one of these is going to be exactly the exposure that you want. Okay, now let's talk about the next button, the zoom button. Here, it's currently set to automatic. In other words, it looks at what focal length you selected on your camera and adjusts it automatically to that focal length. You have a 24-70 millimeter zoom. As you zoom from 24 to 70, you'll see this value change. Now, you might want to overpower this, this value. Well, nothing simpler. You just press the zoom button and then rotate the scale. You see, this is optical zoom, 24, and it's going all the way to 200. So from 20 to 200, and then automatic. And if you want it even wider, remember, just take this panel out and you are good to go with a very wide angle. So this is probably 14 or 16 millimeter. Anyway, a very, very wide coverage of your scene. The widest, it does eat a little bit of light, so only use it really if you need it. Okay, so that's it for TTL mode. Now let's move to manual mode. Just press here. And manual mode is really straightforward. You are telling the flash how much power it should output. And telling the flash means that you simply say, I want you to output all the power you have, or I want to output only a fraction of that power. And the fraction is the important word because you're actually telling that instruction in fractions. So here I've got mode manual and one-on-one. If I press this little LED, it's going to actually trigger that. Bam! I hope you weren't looking at your screen. That's really bad for my eyes. I've got a sort of white spot now. Okay, so how do I change this, this value? Well, you just press here the plus minus and you're good to go. As you're moving this to the right, it increases. Counterclockwise, it decreases the power. 1/16, bam, and you're still good to go all the way down to tiny, tiny 128th of a power. Don't you love that little beep afterwards that just tells you that the flash is ready? So very easy. 1, 2, 3, bam, you're good. Okay, and so you do that in third EV increments. So what does that mean? It means that as I'm going here from 1/16, I've got 1/16 plus 0.3 plus 0.7 before I reach 1/8. Okay, so very, very simple to change these values. That really is all there is to the manual mode. Of course, you still have access to all the zoom features in manual mode, exactly like you did in TTL mode, and it will, even in automatic mode, detect what focal length you're using on your camera. Okay, I'm going to be keeping the third mode, multi, for part 2 of this this video because it's quite a complex mode with some tricks that I want to explain. But let me just finish this part 1 with the different options you have here on the side. So let me get back here to ETTL mode. You've got these different icons that indicate your key settings or options. So as I press here, it cycles this little icon at the bottom. This is a really important one. High speed sync, second current sync. What do any of these mean? Well, first let's start with the high speed sync. I recommend you are always in high speed sync. There is no good reason you should not have your flash set in high speed sync, except if you're using second current sync. But otherwise, always be in high speed sync. Your camera has a maximum sync speed, a speed at which its curtains are going to be completely open, and at that point the flash is going to trigger. That sync speed is typically 1/200th of a second or 1/250th of a second. So if you work any faster than that, there is no moment at which both curtains are open. And which means that the flash really can't fire and expose your whole scene. You know, if this is your scene where the curtain's completely open, the curtains would be like that. So your flash is going to be hitting the curtain as it moves, and that part is not going to be exposed by the flash. That's a problem. So high speed sync solves this problem. It's going to be triggering lots of little flashes all the way as your curtains move, your slit is moving across the image to cover the whole scene. It's going to cost you a bit of battery power. It's going to cost you a lot of power, actually. You won't be able to work as efficiently as you work below the high-speed sync, but it's going to work. Now, why do I say you should always be in that mode if it's costing you power? Because that mode is only activated if you go above your sync speed. So if you're working at 1/100th of a second, even if you're in high speed mode, it's not going to be triggering all the time. It will simply be triggering at the right moment. So this is almost like an insurance. It helps you to work above the sync speed, 1/500th of a second, 1/1000th of a second, and very smartly, it will put itself in normal mode as you go below the sync speed. What's second current sync? Again, this is the whole story of the curtains going up and down in front of your camera. The second current sync simply means that the flash is triggering at the end of your exposure. So let's say you have a 1-second exposure. Normally the flash would trigger at the beginning of your exposure and then let the light during the whole second come in. Second current sync it waits until the very end when your curtain's just about to close, and then bam, it flashes right there. Second curtain sync is fantastic when you want to cover movement, because the flash will stop any movement. And so you would get the movement. If you use first curtain sync, you would stop the movement and then get the movement after where you stopped it. Whereas in second curtain sync, you have the movement behind your subject and then just stopping the light at the right time. So second curtain sync is a key function, and you simply access it by pressing this button here. Okay, now let's look at the different options of the X800c. If I keep my finger pressed here, I access the different icons. And now, just by pressing this button, I move from one option to the next. The first option is the sound beep. Simply select the option, move the wheel, and you're turning it on or off. So I'm going to keep it on because I like hearing that sound when my flash is ready. The second is the LCD lightning. How long do you want to keep that lightning on? So here I have it on infinity, and you can change that to a few seconds to nothing at all. The third option is the autofocus assist light. Do you want this on or off? The autofocus assist light is this light, it's a red pattern that's emitted from the front of your camera that really helps you focus in the dark. So I would recommend always having the autofocus assist light on, except if you're really on off-camera flashes and you have your manual focusing and you really know what you're doing. Otherwise, keep this autofocus light on. The last option here is the standby time. How long do you want the flash to stay turned on while you're not doing anything with it? Okay, this is the end of the first part of how to master the X800c. In the next part, we're going to be looking at the multi-mode and as well the first taking our flash off camera and triggering it with the not so smart modes. But in the third part, we're going to be looking at the very smart modes, the optical, intelligent, TTL, and manual mode, and Pixel's very innovative radio trigger mode. So just follow me for part 2 and part 3. I'm Bless Fiedler. I'll see you soon.